Loving and gracious God, help us keep the common good before us. Strengthen our gifts of wisdom, courage, and respect for the views of others. Strengthen us to continue work with our leaders, seeking an ever more just society that acts in harmony and interdependence with all creation. In the name of Jesus, in union with your Spirit, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Hampton, roll call.
Mr. Michel, Mr. Amade, Mrs. Domain,
Here.
Mr. Daring Guidry,
Here.
Mr. Babin, Mr. Dirk Guidry, Mr. Trosclair, Mr. Navy, Mr. Harding.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum present.
I have a letter from Mr. John Navy, absence from this evening's council meetings, and please be advised that I will be absent from tonight's council meeting, and I will review the agenda and will follow up on matters requiring my attention. I apologize for any inconvenience my absence may cause. Thank you. We also have a letter from Mr. Gerald Michel, which says, I will be unable to attend this evening's council meetings due to an important family issue. I have reviewed the agenda and will follow up on matters that require my attention. In my absence, please extend my apology to my colleagues. Thank you. Approve minutes of the regular council session held on April 13th, 2022. Move Mr. John Amade, seconded Mr. Dirk Guidry. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Distribute minutes of the regular council session held on April 27th, 2022, which we've done. Approve accounts payable bill lists for May 2nd, 2022 and May 9th, 2022. Moved by Mr. Harding, seconded by Mr. Amade. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item 1, general business, presentation by parish administration relative to capital projects, including drainage, utility, road, and quality of life projects, as well as other projects related to operation and maintenance of parish government. Mr. Toops.
Right over here. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I'm waiting to get the clicker. Thank you very much. This week we would like to bring the council and the viewing public up to date on what we call the Shell Oil property project. The official name is the Bayou Terrebonne / Whiskey Bayou Levee Project - Phase 2 Water Control Structures and Drainage Lift Stations. So again, that's why we call it the Shell project. As you all know, President Dell was successful in getting a donation from Shell of this property. It's 6,139 acres of freshwater marsh, and we're going to be using it to create a retention pond which holds roughly 1.78 billion, that's with a B, gallons of stormwater. This is going to help us make a positive impact on FEMA's community rating system. It'll help us reduce our flood insurance rates, and all of the stormwater filtered through this wetland is going to enhance the natural vegetation in this retention area. And please know that we do not plan on doing any dredging whatsoever in this area. We're going to try to keep it as undisturbed as possible. The pump station, let's see, this is another view that shows, and if you look in the lower left corner, the red dot is the location of the pump station, which would be right across Bayou Cane from the rear of the Rouse's supermarket off of MLK. Along Bayou Cane, we have 4 solar operated over electrical sluice gates for water control. Again, there's 2 adjacent to the water pump, and then you can see where the other 2 are to make a total of 4 on Bayou Cane, and then up Above, that's Whiskey Bayou. You can see that we're going to be installing 3 water control structures there. The yellow dots are the sumps that we're going to be adding alongside Savannah Road. We're going to be putting in, let's see, I think I got ahead of myself. We're going to be putting 5, and they're 253 gallons per minute pumps each, along with 23 horsepower emergency generators. And the easternmost one is going to have sumps on both sides of Savannah Road. As you know, that area floods constantly. We're always having to put portable pumps there. So this is going to solve that problem. The pumps are 400, the big pumps are 400 cubic feet per second pumps. There are 48-inch vertical axial flow pumps with 250 horsepower electric motors. We're going to have a 1250 kW emergency generator that's capable of running all 4 pumps at one time. To give you a better perspective of the capacity of this pump station, it can pump 1 million gallons of water every 5.5 minutes. This is, again, another artist concept of the pump station. You can see it shows the 4 electric motors, along with the pumps themselves, and then off in the back are the discharges. Again, this is another artist concept, just from a different angle. And again, this is from, be a kind of a bird's eye view from the very top. The discharge is going to be covered with riprap so that we don't have any erosion. And again, another view. And if you look at the truck that's facing Savannah Road. These are details of the water control structures that are going to go through the levee. Again, they're solar powered, electrical, and again, we have 4 on Bayou Cane and 3 of them on Whiskey Bayou. And this is the operating conditions for the water control structures. In normal conditions, the Whiskey Bayou water control structures, are open to allow for tidal exchange, and the Bayou Cane water control structures are closed. In a rain event where Bayou Cane pump station turns on, all the water control structures will be closed, both on Whiskey Bayou and on Bayou Cane. When the rain event is over and the pump station is off, the Bayou Cane gates open to allow water to drain from the swamp into Bayou Cane, and then after that, they return back to the normal operating conditions as I stated previously. These are a cross-section of the drainage lift stations. Again, we have 5 of them installed at strategic locations along Savannah Road, with 2 of them on the eastern side, close to Rouse's. This is the one extra one at near Rouse's, and it shows that this one's a little bit different because it's on the opposite side of the road from the other 4. And we will be putting guardrails alongside the road at each of these lift stations. Again, to keep them from getting damaged from cars that may run up the road. Again, these are electrically operated. Each one has its own little 23 kW backup generator, and the pumps are electric and they're submersible. And let me see if I missed anything. Oh, we did, GIS is the engineer on the project. We have received already the permit from DNR, and we're waiting for the permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We estimate we should get it in another month to 2 months. The engineering work is probably 95% done. The biggest part of the engineering left to be done is the electrical work. We got 98% of the property rights. Mr. Vince DeGate has been working on that. And of course, the ones remaining are the ones that are the ones most difficult to negotiate with the property owners. At this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Councilwoman Jessica Domain, who's going to talk a little bit about the Nature and Recreation Conservatory part of the project.
Ms. Domain?
Thank you, Mr. Toops, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. About a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, we approached President Dove about doing this project as a way to combine recreation with our pump system and with our water control feature, and he gave his blessing for us to go ahead and work on this. We've been working with GIS, Mr. Chris Pulaski, Mr. David Rome, Rec 2-3 members, Fletcher Shell. We've been working pretty hard on this, so I'm pretty excited about this project, because once it's completed, we'll have bike trails and we'll have walking trails. We'll also have places to go kayak, and it'll work as a nature conservatory. We're actually working right now with Fletcher to see about securing some additional funding so that we can go ahead and move forward with this project. But it was real important that we went ahead and implemented it at the beginning. That way we don't have to retrofit it later to go ahead and be able to put those features on the levees. So this is a picture. This is off of Savan, kind of that area by Savan Road, where we would have a kayak launch. Now, once again, these are just pictures, and so it wouldn't necessarily be exactly like this. This is one of the bike paths that would be on top of the levee, and so as you can see, it's all asphalt. This is actually looking, I think this is supposed to be behind Rouse's, kind of like that area, kind of looking towards that area. We are going to have kind of stub outs that are going to be kind of a nature observation deck, and so the fun thing about this project is working with Fletcher is they can grow some of the local species here in that area, and they can really use this for educational purposes. This is another look at some of the walking trails through that area. And then is that the end of it? Yeah. So we're real excited about this project. Once again, it's one of those projects that we've been working on for a long time, and we've had the wholehearted support of administration. So just excited to see this move forward. So thank you.
We have Mr. Amity.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we know that the drainage portion is going to be $10 million. Do we have any budget estimates on what the recreational aspect is going to cost, so we can start hitting people up for money?
Yeah, that's not included in the $10 million, Councilman Amity, but I do have Kevin.
I know the drainage part is going to be the $10 million.
Correct.
This is going to be additional, so I'm just curious as to what we need to come up with to see this come to fruition.
We do have Mr. Kevin Kaiser from GIS here. I don't know if he's able to answer that question, but I'd like to call him up to the mic. Kevin
Kaiser, GIS Engineering. I got to meet with Councilwoman Domingue and Chris Pulaski a few weeks ago on it, and that was one of the tasks they have given me. I'm sorry I don't have that prepared quite yet, but it's going to depend on the scope. If we want to do a timber walkway across the entire swamp, it's going to be a little more expensive. We're trying, and Unfortunately, as you know, if you've been to the grocery store any place lately, prices are going up on everything. If we have money left over after the pump station, after the drainage, then of course that's going to go towards that project. But it's going to be several $100,000 to put the asphalt chip seal surface and extend a timber walkway into the marsh.
I've built both, so I can tell you this will be more than that.
You're right.
And costs are really going up, and things are hard to find. But I mean, I look forward to it and see that come to fruition. And I'm glad you're talking with Fletcher. I think maybe talk with Terrebonne General too.
That's not a bad idea. One other,
It's the whole thing is health,
Yeah.
promoting good health, and that would be a good opportunity for it. I know I'll go walk the nature trail back on Bayou Black at least once every week.
That's right.
Take my dogs out there for exercise, and this would be great.
One society that I don't have any contacts with, but the Orleans Audubon Society, we reached out to them today. It was today, but so we're hoping to get some partnership with them. Dr. Strickland seems pretty excited about it with Fletcher. So yeah, we're definitely looking for teaming and grants and whatnot.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Domain, did you want to address any of that?
Yeah, and part of the project and part of the conversation we had in that meeting is even if we don't have the funding to start the full project, we may be able to start with a mile or two of that walking track just to start that project, and then we could, once we find the additional funding. So it's not all or nothing like most things. We can kind of start it, and then once we get more money, we can do some more. But we were on an email today with Dr. Strickland. She was real excited. I was in Leadership Terrebonne with Dr. Jacqueline, and so she was really excited about the project, and so I really think that we've got the resources here that we could be able to work with those entities. Maybe even the Lieutenant Governor's office may have some funding ideas for us to be able to get this off the ground.
Mr. Toops, did you have anything to add to Mr. Amedee's concerns?
No, I just forgot a very important part of the project, and that's I double-checked with our CFO earlier today, and she did assure me that we do have $10.5 million fully funded. The money comes from bonds, from Go Mesa, and from sales tax revenues.
To do the drainage piece?
Yes, sir. Well, it's the drainage and the levee work.
Gotcha.
Total.
Mr. Babin?
Yeah, that doesn't include any of the recreation work.
No, sir. It
That's
does
just
not.
our drainage portion of it, okay? And look, I think this is a great project. Do we have any idea how long it's going to be before we start and complete our drainage portion of it?
Kevin, you want to take that, or you want me to?
So as Mr. Toops said earlier, we have part of our permits. As soon as we get the last permit from the Corps of Engineers, the pump station is ready to go to advertisement and bid. We anticipate a month, maybe two. It's hard to tell with permitting agencies, but we constantly check in with them just to let them know we're there. So we're hopeful in 2 months we'll be advertising for the pump station. Once we get that cost in and award that bid, then we're going to do the levee portion. And then it's going to be a good year of construction.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about that. I'm quite familiar with the Corps of Engineer projects because I've got one that's been 7 years now. We hadn't gotten the permits for.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Senator Feasey has spoken to me about Lieutenant Governor and monies that they would possibly be able to come up with. I think in that particular case, it would have to be a state park, but it's just another idea of a revenue source. I mean, I'm not going to liken the two projects together, but there's a bill going through about downtown, and then there's a state agency that would handle it. I don't know if there's any problem with us creating a state park there and let them fund it in conjunction with our drainage project. That may be a bit of a problem. But all I'm saying is Senator Feasey has reached out to me to say that the governor's office would like to possibly get involved in this. So Lieutenant Governor's office, all right? Thank you.
One thing, as it stands now, the parish does plan on keeping it a parish-operated park. And before I finish, Planning and Zoning Chairman Pulaski asked me if we could have
Before we get into that, we have a couple of other lights
I'm
on
sorry.
this issue. Mr. Amity.
Thank you again. One thing we did fail to mention is that President Dove purchased 40 acres behind Public Works for a retention pond and some laydown property, and that dirt's going to go to those levees, so that was a smart move. Benefits me and Carly's districts for drainage off of the St. Louis Bayou, and then again, benefits us for drainage with this project. So they're getting real creative on how they get everything done, and we can always appreciate that.
You're absolutely right, Councilman Amity, because we did do a sample of the dirt in Whiskey Bayou, and it's not suitable to build levees with.
Mr. Trosclair.
Yes, one quick thing. You said we got $10.5 million appropriated in, funding for this project. And we've been working on this thing for the last year and a half. And in the last 6 to 8 months or so, everything has increased in value with inflation 35 to 40%. Are we going to have enough money with $10.5 million? Do you foresee us having enough money or not have enough?
We definitely, as Councilman Amity alluded to, by purchasing that property and using that dirt, that's saving us money because all we're having is hauling costs. And with the gas and diesel prices as high as they are, but we're not having to purchase dirt from somebody who's going to hold us hostage. So that's going to help us on that end. Yes, the steel prices are going to be higher for the pump station and different things, but I'm hopeful that we always put a contingency in our estimates, and I'm sure we're going to use the contingency.
I bet y'all use 35% though, huh? Well, anyway, we need to go with it, but it's something we need to really be looking at.
Right, and that's the whole purpose of having it in phases. We're going to do the pump station first. It's the more expensive part of the project, and we'll know more after that.
All right, thank you.
And I know this project has been in engineering for a year and a half, but Parish President Dove and I have been working on the drainage piece of this as part of the 118 project for many, many years before we got the engineering. And to let everybody know, the layman's term is all of the rain that falls between 311 and Main Street goes into the Savan Swamp and has to come down either Little Bayou Black, ultimately, or Bayou Terrebonne. And as it stands right now, when you get a heavy rain, those bayous have to drain that basin, and they can't. They just can't handle it anymore because of the amount of rain that we're getting and the amount of drainage that this area is doing. This will allow us to retain that water, hold it, and slowly release it to allow Little Bayou Black and allow Bayou Terrebonne to flow the water, because we can't make those bayous any bigger. So it's the only way to do it is to hold the water and slowly release it because of the bayou. So that's really what this project is designed to do. I know it has sumps, it has this, it has that, but the main thing is it's going to hold the water back. Mr. Babin.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Mr. Toops just got through saying, which is very, very important, and maybe a lot of people in the general public don't know it. When it comes to levees, dirt is not necessarily dirt. It has to be conducive to that particular area that you're putting it in. So we can't just say we got a pile of dirt over here and we got to go build a levee. It doesn't work that way. But the fact that the 40 acres that was purchased is conducive to building a levee there does help this project out. If it goes up 35%, it might only, with that savings, it might only go up 28%. But it's going to go up, as we all know. And lead time on a lot of things is what we have problems with today. So in any event, that was a very important thing. Thanks for bringing that up, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Kaiser. Mr. Toops?
Yeah, and the sad reality, like Councilman Trosclair said, what's happening in the country is not only affecting this project, it's affecting all of our projects. Everything we purchase is more expensive than we bought a month ago. Everything takes longer to get. And we're finding that especially hard with electrical components. For whatever reason, we're finding that electrical starters, automatic transfer switches, wire, anything electrically related, it's taking way longer to get than before. And of course, it is more expensive.
Including street light poles, by the way.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I know you have something else, Mr. Toops?
Yes, sir. Mr. Pulaski asked me if I could, as part of my presentation, allow Desire Lines to give a just brief update on what they're doing to assist Mr. Pulaski with his permits division.
If you don't mind stating your name and address for the record.
Of course. I'm Alexandra Carter. My address is 1348 Chickasaw Avenue, Metairie, Louisiana. I'm with Desire Line, and we've been working with Chris and his team and supporting the substantial damage estimates that are part of the recovery process, specifically related to private homes and dwellings. So this isn't public infrastructure. This is your homeowners and your businesses. Okay. I'm going to see if this works. Should it click over? Oh. But just to kind of maybe provide a little bit of a background on why we're presenting while they work out the IT pieces of it, a lot of people are starting, we've just recently sent out letters letting people know whether or not their properties are substantially damaged as a result of Hurricane Ida. And so, there is this kind of, what is that? What does it mean? At the same time that we're advising them that they may be substantially damaged, there's also grant opportunities that are becoming available, and some of the qualifying criteria is being substantially damaged. And so we'd like to kind of take today and just kind of step back and say, like, what does that even mean? And help homeowners really navigate the decision-making process around whether they are or are not substantially damaged, what that means when they go to get a permit, whether they may be eligible for a grant, and kind of make sure they're thinking about all the different sort of traps as they navigate that process. And so, let's see, where to kind of go. I think I've got, okay, I'm going to try to work this way. Okay, so basically, what does it mean, right? We're trying to break this down. In short terms, it means that your property is located in a floodplain, which y'all are very familiar with your floodplains. Everybody, for the most part, I think, understands if they're in a floodplain. If they're not, they should talk to the permitting office and code enforcement and planning. And so they're in a floodplain. That's the first qualifying criteria. And that their home was determined to be 50% or greater damaged, the market value, as a result of Hurricane Ida. And when I say determined, it's an estimate, right? So it's our first estimate on whether or not Ida impacted them 50% or more of their market value of their house prior to the storm, okay? So if you think about it, like, is this gonna cost me 50% more to recover, is the question you should ask yourself if you're a homeowner. And so there was an initial assessment of all the properties in the parish to determine or estimate which properties were 50% or more damaged that were also located in the floodplain. And the key is, to substantial damages, is that this is a regulatory function. It is a FEMA term. It's for FEMA regulatory compliance, right? So this is not a parish term. This is not a local term. This is part of making sure we're meeting FEMA requirements. And so an interesting thing, or something to think about in very simple terms, is that if you're not located in a floodplain, you really cannot be substantially damaged. So that's an important thing to know. If you're stressing about this and you're like, I really want to get a grant, I want to be substantially damaged, if you're not in a floodplain, you can immediately take yourself out of that decision-making process. The other part of it is, if you are in a floodplain and you did receive a letter, it's still an estimate, okay? So we're gonna kind of go through that. And this is all part of permitting, right? So to kind of walk through the policy and the need, this chart tries to kind of walk through the decision-making process that we're actively doing with the permitting office and with your homeowners. And so if you think about it at the top level, where you see number one, this is everyone in the parish that is recovering, and everyone who's impacted, everybody's looking for a grant. So we start there, and then we sort of move down to, the second bullet, which is determining whether or not you're in a flood zone. So if you are in a flood zone, we keep kind of tracking you in terms of whether or not you're substantially damaged. If you're not in a flood zone, you're kind of pushed over to the side and you're going to recover, but you're not falling into this category. After that, we then say, okay, are you damaged more than 50% of your market value? And if you're not, you're, again, not substantially damaged, you fall into the next category. And then even those people who received substantially damaged letters saying you are substantially damaged to the best of our knowledge, right? They still can come in and say, I already meet FEMA requirements. I am already elevated, and I plan on building back elevated, which meets local standards. The really key thing that I think homeowners need to understand is that if they're not elevated and they are in a flood zone and they are over 50%, then in order to get their permit to rebuild, they will need to elevate. So there's going to be an increased cost for compliance, right? And this is the reason why grants are being made available to people who are substantially damaged, because they will actually bear, for the most part, a higher cost in recovery that their insurance or other methods may not cover. So this is an important, if you think about the decision-making process, first of all, we just want to make sure everybody comes in and gets a permit, right? And that they can have this conversation one-on-one with the permitting office. And we're working with Chris and his team. They may talk to me, they may talk to Evelyn, right? So we're hands-on with this. So if I'm talking too fast or this gets really complicated, by all means, come talk to the permitting office. But I think what we really want people to walk away from today, or if they're watching from home, is just to know it's not as simple as I need to be SD to get a grant, right? It's actually, there's a burden of compliance associated with that. Okay, and so the other part of this is that, let's say, these were gonna build on each other. Okay, we kind of went through this. So if you're in that 4 spot, that's where you've got an increased burden, and that's where your grants are really targeted. If you back up even further and say, okay, Alex, you're talking about properties, you're talking about people who are damaged, they're in the flood zone, their structures are over 50%, they've got to comply with FEMA. What are we talking about? Like, where are these properties located? And so what this shows is those concentrations of substantially damaged properties. Every time I say substantially damaged, keep in mind that is an estimate, right? The process working is you bring in your paperwork to the permitting office. If your costs are not 50%, we will amend that determination and say you're not substantially damaged. You can rebuild the way you were before. But if you come in and you propose, enhanced improvements and it tips you over 50%, then you'll move into the substantially damaged process. So it's important to know this is very fluid, and a lot of it gets locked in at the point of permit. And so what we can see here is they're spread throughout the parish, right? This Ida was a very unique event in that it really wasn't traditionally a flood event where you see very concentrations in an area that flooded. The wind really just hit people everywhere, and where you have really extreme damages, it's where you didn't have a lot of tree coverage, or you're on the edge of a subdivision, or it's the age of your building or the type of construction. And so it's important to know it's widespread, but that also we're talking about a universe of around 700 properties, okay? And so when you estimate the cost of recovering from a structure that is substantially damaged, and you start to look at the variety, the scope of all of the structures in your parish, it is a small share, okay? It's like around 2% of the structures in your parish were determined to be substantially damaged, and that's what that bar chart is showing. And why is that important, right? It seems like it's a small amount, but it's really not, because recovering for those structures is going to be a hurdle, a significant hurdle. And so that's why you have these grants. And so what we're showing here is the existing grants that the parish is currently pursuing, right? So those are in blue. It's a small amount of grants. It looks small because the need is large. That's what you see in red. And so if you think about it, if you were to meet all the needs associated with every one of the existing SDs that you have, the 700, you would hit that red bar. Right now, the existing grants you have for HMGP and SWIFT barely get you halfway. So what we want to make sure residents are aware of is if they're trying to become an SD, to get a grant, there is not a guarantee that there's going to be a grant available, and there isn't really a guarantee at this point that even if you are an SD in the first 700 that you're going to be able to get assistance. And so really navigating this process early, before you make decisions, before you repair, before you start reinvesting in your house, make sure you talk to the permitting office. It's such a critical part of the permit review. And FEMA does come in and they do compliance. Like, they're actively in the permitting office, right? And they're going to watch every single SD that is identified. They watch with a laser focus. It's almost like it's on their list, right? They get the list. And so it becomes part of a process that they follow up with years to come. Okay. All right, and so we do hear this a lot, right? A lot of times after a storm, insurance agents come in and they say, you need to be SD because there is a grant that's an increased cost of compliance that sometimes comes from the insurance company, sometimes it comes from FEMA. The timetable for that is a while, so you have to think about where you're going to be while you wait for those dollars to come in. But because Ida was predominantly wind damage, increased cost of compliance is associated with your flood insurance policy. So what we're telling people, what we really need people to take home is, if my insurance agent is asking me for a substantial damage letter, you need to turn around and say, is that on my flood insurance policy? And if I'm substantially damaged from wind, do I still get the benefit? Because what we are looking at in the policy is, more often the answer is going to be no. So you're putting yourself into a position of having to comply to a standard, retrofit your building essentially and elevate, but you may not be eligible for the funds that they think they're going after, because the qualifying event, wind versus flood, is a very important distinction for them to think through with their insurance agent before they take steps that could potentially put them in a position of having to spend more money recovering if in fact they're not substantially damaged. Does that make sense? Y'all are like, I know it's a lot of words. It's very complex. I have copies of this too, and we're on, call with the permitting office. But we just want to make sure, as all these things come up, people are really critical about the steps they take moving forward. And so, did y'all have questions? I can stop.
We do have some questions.
Yeah, I can stop.
Mr. Trosclair.
Yes, I don't know if this is really directed towards you, but probably more Chris. We all know through experience that FEMA and the federal government works at slower than snail's pace. So we got roughly 700 substantially completed damaged homes in the parish. Realistically, let's say 500 of them are rebuildable. 200 probably are not after new construction. So what do these 500 people do while waiting 3 years or 2 years or 4 years or who knows how many years for FEMA or federal government to give them a grant before they can even start repairing their homes, because they have to lift it first? And then, if that's the case, well, then what they have now is no good by the time they're ready to lift it, so they don't need the grant. They're looking for another place to live. So, I mean, what are these people to do?
Well, the first thing I'd say is, when you get an SD letter, don't panic.
Right.
Your fate isn't sealed. So if they contact the permit office, I mean, we have some programs that we're working on creating, but we aren't the only ones. So while the hazard mitigation and the swift current and some of the ones that Alex had on a previous slide are showing up, we're also talking with the folks at the state at OCD, because they too have grant programs that may be a better fit for some of these folks. Maybe they're low to moderate income. So a lot of those people we're going to be shifting over to OCD to address. And one thing that we keep hearing from the state and the feds with this event is that over the years, of course, it has taken years to put some of these programs together, and they're still dealing with it at Laura, but they're already moving faster to get these programs online and available for these folks. So contact the permit office is the first thing I'd say, and then they can sit down, and that's what Alex and her team will be doing and helping us with, and we also have FEMA folks embedded in our office too, who can case manage these people directly and ask the right questions. I mean, they may have documentation that they provide us with, and it takes them off of the substantial damage list, and they don't have to worry about elevating or anything. They're still grandfathered in the way that they were before the storm
But
happened.
that's that 200 I took off the 700 to start with. So, you know, we still got 500 families that theoretically can't do any repairs to their house unless they actually have, you know, I don't know, we talked about 45% inflation here, you know, a couple of minutes ago, say $200,000-$300,000 to lift a $100,000 house
Yeah.
before they can even start working on it. I mean, I don't know. You got a lot of people, you know, I've talked to a lot of people that are in that situation. They can't even start the repairs on their houses because they got this letter of substantial damage. And
Well, they may not be. I know you said that's the 200, but yeah, for those that are, I mean, that's why it's critical that, you know, communities and local governments don't wait for. I mean, some of these.
well,
Some other places have gotten into trouble because they take so long to get these letters out.
I talked about FEMA and federal government, state government, local government, parish government. We all work at snail's pace, okay?
Yeah.
So it's not, no, it doesn't change when you change from one form of government to the other form of government. It's all the same. You know, we doing everything as a council and a parish administration to keep our people here in Terrebonne Parish, but this is not helping to keep them here. I mean, I don't know. And I know we don't have any control over it. I mean, FEMA's got the control. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's just not conducive to these 500 people that ain't got no place to stay.
Yeah.
That's all I got. Thank you.
Mr. Babin.
Yeah, just for the people listening, can you explain the 50% you used, the appraised value? Is that assessed value, appraised value before homestead exemption?
Right,
Just
right.
whatever.
So as part of the substantial damage estimate process, you can use a couple different metrics to determine what your market value is before the storm. Some communities use their assessor's value, but we know that's traditionally very low and will put a lot of people in the SD category. So we don't use that. We actually do a housing market analysis and then provide a cost per square foot for a community. So the key here is to be very consistent in how you make these determinations so that they're very fair and how people get sort of sifted through the process initially. So that's how people are getting letters. We have the housing analysis, we have a cost per square foot, we look at the footprint of your building, we assess whether it's 1 or 2 stories, we calculate that. It often is higher than what you would see anywhere else with any other measure. And the idea is to not inadvertently put people in SD because you have a bad number for the market value. And we've used that consistently in other communities successfully with FEMA. And so, but if you come in and you're like, you know, this still doesn't seem right, I don't agree with that, I think my house is worth more, you can still bring in an appraisal. You can go get an appraisal of your house, or if you have one, you can bring that in and you can say, use this instead. And it's as simple as updating the tool that FEMA provides and seeing how those numbers calculate, and it might drop you below that 50% mark. And this is where I think, you know, Chris is making a great point. It's a fluid process until we talk to a property owner and they can bring in the materials, you know, and they talk about what they're planning on doing with their house. It's really a moving target. You know, they can bring in, you know, an estimate that includes, you know, granite countertops and all these extra add-ons, and you can say, like, some of these costs you don't need to include because they're aesthetic or they're add-ons. They're things that you can take out that'll bring it lower beneath that substantial damage. And so we work with property owners to get to that point where it's like, what is the measure of reasonableness here? And that's what FEMA's looking for too. You know, they're like, if you're in a flood zone, from their policy perspective, you're in a high-risk area, your house has been damaged, we're insuring it, so we want to make sure you build back with less risk.
But, you know, as we all been saying here,
Yeah.
we're in a very unique situation right now. We had a storm, a major storm. We have a lot of people who are damaged. but inflation is at a rate of higher than the last 40 years. So something that may have appraised for $100,000 prior to the storm, maybe $140,000, $150,000.
That's a really good point. I mean, Chris, we can talk to FEMA about inflation. Yeah, because I think we take that into account. We do take that into account. I think I'm like, we
I want to try to get as many things out there for people to understand this.
Absolutely. It's a great point, because you're right. I mean, you don't want to see people pushed into that category if they really shouldn't be.
And to Steve's point, it just slows the process down, and then there's another problem of where you're going to live while you're doing all that.
And I think, the intent behind, and y'all, Terrebonne is really very proactive in this front. The grants that are being made available, the qualifying criteria is being an SD, right? For this very reason, that there are people who can't rebuild, it's too expensive, they have to comply. And so we really want to make sure the grants that are available are servicing the people in most need of them. And so if you haven't gotten a letter and you're not an SD, we really want you to enjoy that, right? Like, you can rebuild and not have these additional burdens, even though it's already just burdensome to begin with, right? Everybody's recovering. But there are little nuances with the wind. Like, the wind damages create all these different hurdles that, the technical elements matter in the long run, or you could find yourself, trying to get a grant, not getting it, and then having a higher bar for compliance and kind of being like, I'm in a position that I did not anticipate, and years from now trying to, push the letter back to the parish, right? We've seen that, right? We've seen people try to say, I don't want this anymore, and you can't undo that determination. And so once you receive a permit, right? Once you receive that permit, so.
Mr. Amity.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this just applying to residential structures, and is there something out there for
It
commercial
applies
structures?
to private property. So, like, for the most part, you do your assessments, your PA.
My question, I'm dealing with someone that has a church. They built it 12 years ago, but now they're saying they have to raise it.
Yeah, if they're in the floodplain and they have flood insurance, it's going to apply to them.
So I'll tell them to call y'all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Harding.
Yes, in a situation like that, this insurance.
Yeah.
Everyone that had insurance, even those that didn't have insurance, had an insurance question. So how the insurance company has been handling these people, and we just give a heck of a pump station thing, saying we're doing this, we're doing that. Even down in the bayous, we're better with flooding, and we have wind damage. So even though these people with that wind damage, and you have substantial damage to these people's property, they are in a turmoil with their insurance company. So my part of, I'm saying here is just to throw it out there, and for those people that are there, and I don't want these people to get caught up in a trap. When you say elevate, I found out money make money, but then sometimes you need money to get money. So the cost of a house and the elevation, what is the percentage that you finding that they would have to pay? You mentioned a $100,000 house, it costing $300,000 to raise it. Well, what is the percentage that these folk, they're gonna have to pay? So you need money to even really get to that point.
Where there's a match. Yeah, and you're right to bring that up, right? So sometimes the grant doesn't fully cover the costs of the project, right? And so you have to think about, what is your match? And so it really depends on the grant that's funding your project. So like Chris had mentioned earlier, HMGP is different. They have a match, depends on the size of the project. SWIFT is a little different. OCD is a little different. And each one of those programs thinks about the cost of reconstruction differently because their missions are different, right? So FEMA is thinking more about it from an insurance standpoint, so they have matches. OCD is Office of Community Development. They think of it more as, we're hitting an unmet need. Sometimes you can get a housing incentive and you can get 100% costs covered. And so it really comes down to the location, the people you're servicing and the agency that is providing those funds. And so there isn't ever a simple answer, but I think y'all have, a service agreement to help you navigate these grants. And that's going to be really important, that as citizens kind of start to think about, what do I want to do? What are my options? That they're aware of what's going on. And I think y'all are really good at communicating to your public. I mean, that's why we're here today, right? To make sure people know moving forward to call the permitting office and the planning office when they're thinking about pursuing SC status. But you're right. I mean, they need to also think about, even with a grant, that comes with a series of strings,
Which brings out a point. I think most of the people are transitioning from in the bayous, but then those people that have been down these bayous, and then I saw those 3 circles down there. It might be me and Steve age, and you're incurring a cost of about $150,000. In your 60s, and maybe you spend all your money because the insurance company, is giving you the runaround. So we're looking at those folk. And the other factor about that, there are people that have substantial damage that are not in these areas, but then if you look at our maps, and some of these insurance companies, they are asking people to jack their houses up because of the flood. And some of these people are within the city limits.
Right.
So, you have that map up there with those circles up there. I witness people that's right here in the urban portion of our town that they have to have that. And then generally, those people that are in the area that I'm representing in other areas down those bayous, they're in a fix. So, I'm putting it out there for those folk out there, and especially I don't want them to get caught up with the insurance problem. Here we got wind damage, but then you're asking the people to have flood insurance. You're asking them, and you're telling them to elevate their homes, and after they elevate their homes, they're only paying a certain percentage of that. And then even though you elevate your home, you still got to pay flood insurance, and then your heirs going to actually have to keep the flood insurance because you got something that you're locked into. So
it is a
I'm
really
putting it out there.
difficult process. Yeah, I think that you capture it really well. It's a difficult process, and that's why where you can recover on your own with your insurance funds, you should. And so for those people who can't, those resources are made available to them. Yeah.
Mr. Guidry.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of what Mr. Carly Harding had to say. We got a lot of elderly people down there that had substantial damage to their homes. And if y'all got to put all these regulations and rules on them, we got 60, 70-year-old people that's going to be out on the street with no place to live, and that's what's going to happen. And what you're doing is you reckon this program is helping, but it's also wrecking Mr. Trosclair's district, Mr. Babbitt's district in mind, because we're going to make people move out of these bayous, and we're going to lose our fire taxes for our fire ratings. We're going to lose recreation taxes. We're going to lose street lighting district lights. So, it's going to just totally destroy these communities. Now, we already got people that I know that y'all sent substantially damaged property things to. They already got their houses fixed back. So what do?
We hope that they were already elevated to the requirement.
No, some of them weren't elevated. No, they weren't elevated, but you're talking a totally different kind of people that's living down these bayous, like what me and Mr. Trosclair was talking about. When you go in and you figure out how much money it costs to fix a house.
Right.
Most of these guys down these bayous are jack of all trades. They can do anything. I don't care if it's plumbing, electrical, carpentry work, roofing work. They can do it themselves. How does that fall under the price of substantial? Does it have to be a contractor?
I think that our recommendation is always to come to the permitting office and get your permit. Don't build without a permit.
Right.
Because that's the only way we can ensure that your building meets code.
I'm going to let you know that.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry, Chris, that there's nobody that ever and I live in Chauvin. I'm one of the worst districts that got damaged. Me and Mr. Trosclair and Mr. Babbitt. There's nobody that's ever stopped while these people were working on their homes and told them to go get a permit. And look, now we had hundreds and hundreds of homes messed up. And I've seen our parish people going up and down these roads. Not one person in my district, and I represent a district that got a lot of damage, and not one person ever stopped and said, hey, you need a permit. You know, there's been Down in Chauvin, that's probably been 4,000 roofs put on homes. How many permits you got for roofs down in Chauvin, Chris?
I'd have to check.
Not many, huh?
4,000.
Not 4,000, no. And these people did this all themselves. So is that price of substantial damage, does it have to be a contractor? Because you can't even get a contractor. So what, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. So, like I said, getting the letter, your fate isn't sealed. So what I would say, even if you've already done the repairs, still contact the permit office, because if you've got some sort of documentation to cover the cost of the repairs, whether you made them yourself or you hired subs to do it or you hired a general contractor to do it, what triggers which contractor, sub, whatever, depends on the scope of work involved and the cost associated with it. So, on the street you hear after the fact permit. That's kind of the slang term for it, right? So, that's still good enough for us. Any permit is better than none at all. So, if you do have a substantial damage letter or receive one, but you've already done the repairs, still contact the permit office and we'll case manage you knowing that.
Right.
And we can go back, we can backtrack through that process. And once again, we may determine that you are not substantially damaged because the cost of the repairs weren't over 50% of the value of your structure.
Right.
And the key is,
We won't know that until we have somebody, contacting us and working with us on
Doc, if you build something right now, you know that if it's 100,000, 50,000 is going to materials, 50,000 going to labor. Now to use people's labor, where did that fall in?
Well,
If you do it yourself labor.
that's a good point, and we're definitely going to be exploring that one more with
Right.
FEMA for
Chris, down these
the cost of
people
inflation.
do it themselves.
Yeah.
Most of these homes, they build themselves.
Right.
They didn't get contracts. They built these homes themselves. They wired these houses themselves. They plumbed these houses themselves, So.
Unfortunately, most of the structures on this list, I would imagine, are residential structures,
Yeah.
and they have a little bit more leeway in terms of what they can and can't do themselves than, say, a commercial structure does.
Right.
So, I would advise all of you, if you have constituents that contact you, make sure that they contact our office, because that's what we have people, to assist them with, and we'll get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, because
we know what it means to
with
keep
this
people
right
in those
here,
communities.
the people that it's going to hurt is going to hurt the elderly people or people on fixed incomes.
You're right.
What the average home right now with everything that's going up costs $5,000 more a year to live. So you're going to elevate. They need their houses elevated. You elevate the house, then they got to. Insurance is crazy because I just got a quote for $9,000 something for insurance. How do they pay another with the economy going up like they are, and pay you guys the flood insurance?
well, not us, right? So we're not FEMA, right? So
I'm telling you, what I'm telling you. Look at the expenses, then. And you 60 years old, you 70 years old, and you worked hard all your life. Some of these people
absolutely.
worked hard all their life. They might make $25,000, $30,000 retired pay. You know what I mean?
Right.
So how do they afford this? Where do they go? What happens to these people? Are these the people in the future that's going to be living underneath the bridges?
I don't think so. I think this is the point of the grant programs, right? The grant programs are really targeted to the unmet need and the vulnerable populations. And so this is the message we really want to hit home today, is that if you're not in that arena, with the limited amount of grant funding that we know is available today, make sure you're not, competitively pulling from those funds if you in fact can recover on your own.
And I understand somebody 40 years old, they're healthy, they can go out, they can still make a living, and they can recover.
Yeah.
But how about grandma and grandpa down the road, or somebody that's disabled, How do they recover from this? You can't live in that little bitty camp all your life. You can't live in that FEMA trail all your life. Yeah. So that's what bothers me the most, is what happens to these people, hardworking people that contributed for 60 years of their life working, that are not going to have a home to live in. And that's what's going to eventually happen here. So, Chris, it's going to be a mess, man.
Oh, yeah.
It's
this is not you go to Lake Charles, they're still
working
still recovering.
Right.
Now, I'm encouraged from what I've heard that, in some areas we're further along in processes than they were in Calcasieu and Lake Charles. But, I mean, this is not something that's going to be, we're going to be back to normal in a year. First of all, there's no going back to normal.
No.
I mean, take a look down your street. It looks totally different. Easy way, the trees are gone. You know, I mean, it's going to be a new normal. You hear that word, but I mean, the recovery's, it's a process. It takes years to recover from something like this. So, I mean, everybody's just got to be.
All I'm asking is if you give these people a chance and you kind of lenient on them and you try to help them out, they coming back. If not, these communities that we represent down these bayous are going to be finished. No tax money. No tax monies. How do they exist?
Yeah.
I mean, then if my fire ratings go up to a 9 or a 10, then I'm paying another $2,500 on insurance because my fire ratings went up because there's no people living down here to pay property taxes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not just something that's going to be fixed over. In years to come, there will be no bayou life. There's going to be people with camps, millionaires coming down these bayous that can afford this, and they're going to build camps. And the people, the native people, the Indians, the Cajun people that live down these bayous, the heritage that we have is going to be over with. Because, you know, just because they move down this bayou, that don't mean they stop at Terrebonne Parish. Because a lot of people I know that's moving out, they moving to Mississippi. They moving to Alabama. They're not even stopping at the parish lines. So, I mean, it not only hurts us, but it hurts all the Terrebonne Parish. Don't only hurt the bayous. We all come from down these bayous, and we spend our money on Martin Luther King Boulevard, or we spend our money at all these stores in Homer. So it's not only hurting us down these bayous, it's hurting the whole parish in the future. We won't have money to operate. But I could go on, Chris, but man, all I'm begging for y'all is to take care of these people down these bayous. Take care of these elderly people because they need it. They really, really, really need it. I've seen it from day one after this hurricane came through that we had a humanitarian problem. And we still have a humanitarian problem. And the more the government comes and messes with our lives, the more problems we have. Because if they would stay out, if the government, and I'm part of the government, if we would stay out of the lives of these people down these bayous, then we'd rebuild. Then we'd come back, you know? And the old grandma and old grandpa, they would chacoter my house, in French, putting it back together, a house, and they'd still be living down there and paying taxes. So whatever y'all got to do, let me tell you, my heart is in with these people that I represent.
I think we all feel that way.
know?
We were down there doing the inspections, talking to them in the streets. So like, we understand exactly where you're coming from. And I think the approach that we took was the most reasonable approach. And that's why you have 2% of the population in this category. And even within that 2%, there's still a window to bring in additional documentation to fall below 50%.
Just lose a lot of those pictures y'all got taken, guys.
So we're just being really, really smart in how we're assessing this issue. So just know that we're from here. This is not our first storm. This is not our first SD process. And so all of the knowledge and expertise that we have has been applied to your case to keep this number reasonable.
But just please keep them in consideration because that's where my heart is with them, you know.
We understand completely.
Thank you, ma'am.
Absolutely.
Mr. Babin.
Yeah, just a quick, and it may not be the greatest of analogies, but when we talk about the government moving slow in the wheels of bureaucracy, we just closed out 2 weeks ago the last case on Gustav Ike, all right?
Yeah.
Am I right?
Right.
Chris? So,
Great example.
and how long ago was that? 12 years? So it takes a while. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Ms. Carter.
Of course.
Move along, item B, proclamation proclaiming May 2022 as Cancer Awareness and Melanoma Skin Cancer Detection and Prevention Month. It's my pleasure to read this proclamation. It says, whereas cancer has a dramatic effect on the people of Terrebonne Parish, both young and old, and whereas the hard work is ongoing in Terrebonne Parish and across the world to find effective treatments and the ultimate goal, a cure for cancer. And whereas the American Cancer Society recently hosted the successful Relay for Life at the Home of Terrebonne Civic Center, a movement that inspires the community to celebrate people who have been touched by cancer, remember loved ones lost, and take action for life-saving change. And whereas over $289,000 was raised through the 2022 American Cancer Society's Relay for Life of Terrebonne Parish, and whereas funds raised from Relay for Life events allow the American Cancer Society to attack cancer in dozens of ways, each of them critical to achieving a world without cancer, from developing breakthrough therapies and innovative research to building supportive communities that come together to help those affected by cancer with access to treatment. Whereas $811,000 was invested in Louisiana researchers in 2021 alone, funding studies to find causes of and better treatments for cancer and to improve the lives of cancer patients. Whereas the month of May is National Cancer Awareness and Melanoma Skin Cancer Detection and Prevention Month. And whereas skin cancer is the most common of all cancer types, more than 5 million skin cancers are diagnosed each year in the United States, and this is more than all other cancers combined. And whereas there is no sure way to prevent skin cancer, and some risk factors cannot be changed, such as age, race, and personal history, but there are things that you can do to protect yourself and your family, like limiting your exposure to UV rays, protecting your skin with a broad-spectrum sunscreen with a sun SPF of at least 30, wearing long sleeves, covering your head, and avoiding sunbathing, tanning beds, and sun lamps. And now, therefore, be it resolved by the Terrebonne Parish Council, on behalf of the Parish President, Gordon E. Dove, and the entire Terrebonne Parish Consolidated Government, that the month of May be hereby proclaimed Cancer Awareness and Melanoma Skin Cancer Detection and Prevention Month in Terrebonne Parish, to show our support to those individuals living with cancer and honor those individuals that have lost their lives to the dreaded disease of cancer. This is signed by our Parish President, Gordon E. Dove, myself, Darren Guidry, as Chairman of the Council, and on behalf of all the Terrebonne Parish Council. Thank you. And we have somebody from the If you don't mind, state your name and address for the record.
Jason Bajeron, 120 Maple Avenue. I want to thank you all for recognizing the hard work, resilience of our community, and the volunteers that put this event together. We got some little goodies going out to remind everybody of the cause and what we're doing. I want to thank, again, the community really came together. As you heard, $290,000. By the end of May, we'll be up around $300,000 for the first in-person relay in 2 years. We started out with a lip sync competition and a lot of great contestants that came out, and we raised about $65,000 there, and then finished everything up with the relay. And so it's coming back, and you know, we want to make sure that everybody understands that, you know, when you see this money go out to something like Relay for Life, American Cancer Society, like I think you mentioned, you know, since 1946, $20 million has come back to Louisiana alone. And so this money does come back to our area for research, for grants, for lodging, for transportation, and working closely again with Terrebonne General and the other hospitals in the area. The hard work and effort that everybody puts out does come back to us. And so I want to thank our ELT team, our staff partner, Ann Bates. We have a few of our ELT team here tonight. The sponsors, Gulf Island was a presenting sponsor, Cenac Marine Services, and Stratify Group were platinum sponsors, and we couldn't do it without our sponsors. And the teams, we raised that much money with about 57 teams, as compared to historically 120 teams. And so our slogan, our theme for this year was really Be Strong. You know, we're beating cancer, we're going to beat Ida. That all went together, and we're a resilient community, and we're fighting hard. And hear everything we're talking about tonight and everything that we're going through, and our area will come back and we'll rebuild, and we're going to continue to fight cancer. And it's amazing the amount of people that have talked about how much cancer affects them. My mother passed 6 years ago this month. My mother-in-law, my uncle are both survivors. It seems like everybody I talk to, it seems like every day it's somebody that's younger. Louisiana leads the nation in the amount of cancer cases by states, and so thank you. We like to celebrate survivors, by the way. So thank y'all for recognizing this and bringing it to attention. I think it's important in our area, and we really appreciate it.
Mr. Harding?
Yes, I appreciate all the work you're doing. I see Mike had his finger up. I think a couple other people up here. I actually I went to the doctor in April and say I'm cancer-free, so it affects a lot of people. So I appreciate all the work y'all doing.
Here you go. Thank you very much, Mr. Bergeron.
All right, thank you.
Public wishing to address the council. We don't have any speaker cards. 6:30 public hearings. An ordinance to establish and define the Terrebonne Parish visible precinct boundaries. Public once, public twice, third time public. Motion to close, Mr. Steve Trosclair, seconded Mr. Dirk Guidry. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion to adopt, Mr. Steve Trosclair, seconded Mr. Dirk Guidry. Any discussion? Mr. Harding?
Yes, I was asked a question by my constituents, and then it may be a case with some of the other precincts in reference to the people that were in the Bayou Towers area, why they had to pass up 2 precincts to get to an area where they had to vote. And it's because the locations that they were having, they were limited with space. And the South Island Elementary School was the next best place that they had a large enough facility to receive these people. So I just want to put that out there to my constituents and then other people that may have the questions in other precincts and why they have to move so far. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ordinance is approved. Item B, an ordinance to amend the 2022 adopted operating budget, budgeted positions, and 5-year capital outlay budget of the Terrebonne Parish Consolidated Government for the following items and to provide for related matters. Juvenile Detention Center LCLE grant, $15,000. Houma Police Department LCLE grant, $60,454. Bayou Blue Sidewalks, $15,000. General Fund TITA, $150,000. Jail Plumbing Project, $62,000. Animal Shelter Donation, $30,000. Risk Management, a credit of $31,958. Add a full-time insurance technician. Delete full-time admin tech 1. Delete full-time admin tech 2. Public once. Public twice. Third time public.
Motion closed.
Motion to close, Mr. Dirk Guidry, seconded Mr. Carl Harding. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt, Mr. Dirk Guidry, seconded by Mr. Carl Harding. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ordinance is adopted. Committee reports, Budget and Finance Committee, Mr. Carl Harding.
Yes, I make a motion that the council accept and ratify the minutes of the Budget and Finance Committee held on May 9th, 2022, and I have 3 public hearings. The first one introducing the audience to adopt adjusted millage rates for tax year 2022 for parish property taxes subject to roll forward provisions and calling for a public hearing on said matter on Wednesday, May 25th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. 6 p.m. Number 2, introducing an ordinance to adopt a millage rate for tax year 2022 for the parish property tax and no roll forward provisions and call for a public hearing on said matter on Wednesday, May 25th, 2022 at 6 p.m. Thirdly, introducing an ordinance to authorize the acquisition of property sites and/or servitudes required to provide a public boat launching adjacent to Bayou Petit Caillou that facilitates and promotes boating, fishing, and hunting, and call for a public hearing on said matter on Wednesday, May 25th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Harding, seconded by Mr. John Amity. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Item B, Public Service Committee. Mr. John Amity.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I make a motion that the council accept and ratify the minutes of the Public Services Committee held on May 9, 2022, and I have no public hearings.
Motion, Mr. Amity, seconded, Mr. Dirk Gidry. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Community Development and Planning Committee, Mr. Steve Trosclair.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I make a motion the council accept and ratify the minutes of the Community Development Planning Committee held on May 9, 2022, and I have no public hearings.
Motion by Mr. Trosclair, seconded Mr. Amity. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Appointments to various boards, committees, and commissions. The Veterans Memorial District, one expired term representing the Vietnam Veterans of America, and Mr. Cliff Chasson expresses his interest in being reappointed. We have a motion to open, close, and appoint by Mr. Danny Babin, seconded by Mr. Carl Harding. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Appointment is made. Item 5, vacancies to various boards, committees, and commissions. We have Rec District 2-3 Board, 2 vacancies due to resignation. Rec District 9 Board, 1 expiring term on June 8th of 2022. Library Board of Control, 1 expiring term on June 24th, 2022. Consolidated Waterworks, 1 expiring term June 24th, 2022, representing Council District Number 3. Announcements. Parish President, anything, Mike? Council members? Mr. Harding?
Yes, on Saturday, May 14 at 2 p.m., Eagle Right Baptist Church, 3113 Park Avenue. That will be a unity within the community where we have law enforcement speaking with citizens and actually having some resolve so we can actually raise the quality of life sufficient to those people in Terrebonne Parish. And a lot of people coming from it's coordinating Terrebonne and Lafourche Parish. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. Mr. Babin?
Yes, along the lines we've been talking about the bayous and people recovering, we dedicated 2 more homes than Dulac yesterday that the Mennonites built. That's 4 now out of the 10 that they're going to build. And again, we talk about government. Every bit of money that's been applied down there, which has been right at $1.9 million, came from private sources. Not a penny of local, state, or federal government money. And another $1 million is already pledged for the Mennonites to come back in October to build 10 more homes. And they're working on another $1 million after that to bring another. The point is this group has now fixed substantially completed over 40 homes being remodeled, plus probably another 30 with just some small damage that they needed, plus these 10 new homes and another 10 homes at the end of this year. And again, government can't do it all. It takes private, philanthropic people to come out and do it, and thank God that they are. So Grand Kaya is very proud right now. So thank you very much.
Ms. Domingue.
Yeah, I would just like to request some prayers for safe travel for myself, Miss Melissa DeRocher, and Miss Sandra Corbett from the Home of Terrebonne's Visitors Bureau as we travel to Virginia next week to attend the National Main Street Conference.
Mr. Dirk Gidry.
Yeah, we're going to go back down the bayou again here. Hey, listen, the shrimp season opened last Monday morning. There's an abundance of shrimp, so if anybody needs seafood, would you please go down these bayous and help these fishermen out? We have a problem. We got too much shrimp, and not enough ice plants, and not enough peeling machines for these shrimp to be processed. So, if you could, please go down these bayous and purchase some shrimp. You could go buy a 16, 20-count shrimp cheaper than you could buy a pound of ground beef. So go help these guys out. These big boats is costing them $25,000, $30,000 to fill up their tanks to go out trawling. They're having a hard time. There's some of these shrimp docks are limited how much these shrimpers can bring to the dock right now, and there's boats lined up trying to unload their shrimp where they can't unload because there's not enough seafood processors anymore. There's not enough ice plants down these bayous because a good bit of them got destroyed. So if you can, man, just go right down these bayous. It doesn't matter if it's any 5 bayous down this parish, and purchase some shrimp from these fishermen and really help them out, because if you look at it, they're the backbone of this community. They were here before the oil field was here. They were here before anybody was here. So please go out and help out these guys and bring your ice chest and purchase your ice chest of shrimp. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, I would like to announce, and I'm going to announce this at each one of our council meetings, that the council does have an opening for a position, and that position is for a minute clerk. And the summary of the position is to provide clerical support to the council members and the council clerk, including the attendance at certain council committee and other meetings assigned by the council, and the preparation of agendas prior to and the minutes following said meetings. If you are interested in applying for our minute clerk position, please contact our Human Resources Department, or I believe you can apply online. Thank you. Committee reports, monthly engineering report, should I say. As per Mr. Danny Babin, seconded Mrs. Steve Trosclair. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Under staff reports, we do have 2 add-ons that have been requested at the will of the council. Of course, they require a unanimous vote. And the first add-on is an emergency ordinance, which is an ordinance pursuant to Section 2-14 of the Terrebonne Parish Home Rule Charter of the Terrebonne Parish Consolidated Government to approve an agreement with AEGIS Hedging Solutions, LLC, to protect the health, safety, and well-being of the citizens of Terrebonne Parish and to address other related matters, if somebody cares to make a motion to add it on. We have a motion to add on Mr. Trosclair. Do we have a second? Second, and Mr. Amity. Do we have anybody from the public that would like to address whether or not we should add this on to the agenda? Public once, public twice, third time public. We don't need to close. We have a motion and a second. All in favor to add this on the agenda? I guess you need to do a roll call vote, Mr. Hampton.
Mr. Michel, Mr. Amade. Aye. Ms. Domain.
Yeah, aye.
Mr. Darren Guidry.
Aye.
Mr. Babin. Mr. Dirk Guidry.
Yes.
Mr. Trosclair.
Yeah.
Mr. Navy. Mr. Harding.
Yay.
Okay, so the item is added on to the agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt the ordinance? We have a motion to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Danny Babin.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Carl Harding. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The next add-on is giving notice of intent to adopt an ordinance dedicated to dedicate and accept maintenance operation of streets, drainage servitudes, sewer, and right-of-ways of Park Evangeline Subdivision Phase B, energize and accept the street lights, and to incorporate Sophie Drive and the extension of Marie Claire Drive and Rue de Fers into the Emergency 911 emergency response system for the purpose of providing a better ways of locating addresses, and call a public hearing on said matter Wednesday, May 25th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m.
Motion to add on.
We have a motion to add on by Mr. Dirk Guidry, seconded by Mr. Steve Trosclair. Do we have any public that wishes to address whether we should add it on or not? Mr. Waits, you want to give your name and address for the record?
David Waite, 7839 Park Avenue, representing the developer on this. I'm the engineer for the project. And number one, I'll answer any questions that y'all have about the project and why we're doing this. And
Well, if you want to answer maybe why it needs to be added on to the agenda?
Well, normally what we do a subdivision, we do 10, 20 lots at a time. We're doing 125 lots on this particular development at an infrastructure cost almost $4 million. So it's quite a bit of money out on the table. It's a DSLD subdivision. They got a contract to buy all these lots, and we have an expiration date of that contract. So we don't want to fall with that and have the developer on the hook for $4 million project. I mean, keep in mind, when you go through the engineering and the construction and the final approval of these projects, they take well over a year to do. And we're dealing with the aftermath of Ida and all the other stuff we did with COVID and materials. Energy took a long time to get this power into the subdivision, which is pushing us back on this deadline right now. And that's where we are today, trying to get this wrapped up as soon as we could so we don't miss a deadline.
Thank you, Mr. Waits.
Okay.
Any other public? We have a motion and a second to add on. Roll call vote, Mr. Hampton?
Mr. Michel, Mr. Amade, Ms. Domain,
Aye.
Mr. Darren Guidry,
Yes.
Mr. Babin, Mr. Dirk Guidry, Mr. Trosclair, Mr. Navy, Mr. Harding.
All right. So it is added on. Do we have a motion to introduce the ordinance by, or to adopt the resolution by Mr. Danny Babin, seconded by?
Second.
Mr. Amade. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you
The
very much.
ordinance is adopted. Motion adjourned?
Motion adjourned.
Motion adjourned, Ms. Domain, seconded by Mr. Steve Trosclair. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thanks, guys.